Hello. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Mrs. Roth, and I'm a history and Bible teacher here at school. And I have been graciously given the opportunity to share in two different chapels, one this morning and then one Thursday, about the year I spent living and serving on the island of Jamaica, and telling how important that year was to the story of who I am. And it being the time where I felt like I didn't belong a whole lot, but also it was the time where I found my true self and learned to know who I was and become confident in that. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you. So this is my family. So my junior year, and actually let me go back a little bit. To give you some background, I moved here into the area when I was, I think, 8 years old, and I went to middle school at Thomas Harrison, and then transferred here to EMS when I was a freshman in high school. So I did what a number of you have done. And I want to give a little background because it'll flow into my story here eventually. But at Thomas Harrison, I was really involved in leadership. I was the president of the SEO my senior year. I was involved in a ton of clubs, expressing my gifts, doing a lot of things. Then I came to EMS my freshman year, and I didn't know many people. Those who had been here in middle school already had relationships, and it was just really hard to kind of break into that. So instead of kind of continuing the leadership path that I was on, I spent most of my time once I came here just trying to fit in with the people that were here and try to find a place very quietly, believe it or not, for me. And that doesn't really change until after my year that I spend in Jamaica. So now back to that. My junior year of high school, my dad, who worked at the seminary up at EMU, had a sabbatical. So he had a year off to do some work that he wanted. So he had two options: live with the Amish for a year or go and do leadership development with the Mennonite churches on the island of Jamaica. And I'm very glad that my father chose the second option, to go to Jamaica. So this is the picture of my family that was on our prayer cards that were sent out for that year. We were on the island with a number of other missionaries from Virginia Mennonite missions as well. The family on the far left are the Stoners. Next to them, Omar and Dolores Byler, then Earl and Kathy Moyer, and finally my family. We lived in Top Hill, Jamaica, which was a teeny tiny rural town on the south coast in the parish of St. Elizabeth. If you've been to Jamaica as a tourist, most of the tourist areas are on the north part of the island. I lived on the south, and in a parish where there's very little tourism, and we lived kind of down right near the coast in that red area. This is the house that I lived in, and a view of it from the road. It's the one with the 4 windows. Here is a view out our front window, so you can see just how close to the ocean we were. It wasn't very far geography-wise, but if you wanted to drive somewhere to a beach where you could get into the water, it took about 45 minutes because of the roads. But gorgeous, beautiful views. This is a view from the other side of my house looking down into the small community we lived in. I wanted to show this picture because that orange building there is one of the shops in the area where you can go and buy snacks and drinks and things like that. So one of the first times where I felt like I didn't really belong was really early on in living there. I went to this store to buy, I remember this vividly, cheese balls, because I love Jamaican cheese balls. They're the best. If you ever get a chance to go to Jamaica, try the cheese balls. And a Freezy Pop. So I'm a junior in high school standing there eating cheese balls and a Freezy Pop, talking to someone. And a 5 to 6-year-old little boy walks up to the counter and buys the biggest bottle of rum available in the shop, pays for it, and walks out. As you can imagine, my face was kind of in shock, and I was like, wow, I'm in a different place here. But there's no drinking age in Jamaica, and I'm positive the boy wasn't buying the rum for himself. Rum is used in most drinks, in cakes, and in a lot of other baking things in Jamaica. So I'm sure he had been sent by his mother or father to go purchase it for use at home. But I remember just thinking, wow, this is really unique. Here I am with my cheese balls, and there goes a 5-year-old with a big old thing of rum. Another thing that I had to get used to was just how rare a commodity water was on the year that I lived in Jamaica. And it's kind of ironic because it's an island and there's water everywhere around you. But having water for cooking, drinking, bathing, things like that, it was very rare. It is not accessible like it is here in the US. So every house in Jamaica would have a water tank or a cistern is more common. So this is our neighbor's cistern. They basically collect the water anytime it rains and then use that water. So I learned when I lived there not to waste water. I have never thrown out a cup of drinking water if I didn't finish drinking it. You always set it aside and finished it later. You didn't flush the toilet every time you went to the bathroom. Showers were you'd turn on the water, hop in, get wet, turn it off, shampoo, then turn the water back on, rinse real quick, and turn it back off. So I learned water was precious and to make sure not to waste it. And that's something I still try to carry with me today, even back in the US where water is not quite so scarce. This is my dad filling up our water jugs for drinking and cooking water, which we had to drive about 30 minutes to get to a place with that type of water. This was my bedroom in the house that I lived in. Another thing that I had to get used to were all the critters in Jamaica. This is a croaker. They're little lizards that are everywhere in your house. They're called croakers because they make incredibly loud croaking sounds. So I got used to sleeping through that. Another cool thing about them is when prey comes after them, they can drop their tails and run away. So you'd always find little tails somewhere throughout our house because the lizards thought they were in danger, so they dropped them and ran off. This is the town, the closest town towards where we lived. We lived in a very rural area. This is Junction. Took about 10 to 15 minutes drive to get into the town itself. And that year in Jamaica was one where I clearly did not fit in. And it was very obvious to anyone who saw me that I didn't quite belong. My family, as well as Earl and Kathy, were the only what are called whiteys in the area. So anytime we would go into town, we would hear people call whitey, whitey, or come up and talk to us because we were unique and interesting. I also had many times where I'd be in the grocery store or walking down the street and a child would reach up and touch my hair to feel it because it was so different a texture. And it was really unique for me because that was the first time in my life where I had ever been a minority. But there was an odd twist to it too, in that even though I was the minority based on my skin tone in Jamaica, I was considered to be a minority that was in a position of power. Most Jamaicans considered us to be incredibly rich, wealthy, powerful people. I remember in the year I lived there, I was proposed to at least 4 different times, never by anyone I knew personally, just someone who saw, oh, there's a white girl, maybe I can have a chance at making a better life for myself if I can marry her. And a tie into that is that the language that is spoken in Jamaica is English because Jamaica was a British colony for a very long time. But most Jamaicans, instead of speaking what they call the Queen's English, speak a patois. And the one phrase I really learned well in patois was how to call my sister. So that would be Agyo Nicole Kumya. So, a girl, Nicole, come here. Agyo Nicole Kumya. So once you've heard it for a while, you can understand it. Like, it was easy enough for me and my family to understand while we lived there. We were never fluent speakers in patois, nor did we ever try. All Jamaicans understand the Queen's English and can speak a more English form of English. But I always felt guilty having to have people change or speak differently in order for me to be able to understand them and communicate with them if I couldn't understand the patois. The connection to the engagement story is my first proposal in Jamaica. My dad totally didn't understand what the man was saying, and he was like, yes, yes, mm-hmm. And we had to tell my dad, no, no, if you don't understand, don't just say yes, yes. So another photo of Junction. Moving on to the food. If you ever get a chance to go, one of my favorite foods were juicy patties or beef patties. They're delicious little snacks. But a lot of the cooking is seafood, since Jamaica is an island, is very common, as well as goat is the most common meat. Everyone raises and has goats. Also a national dish is what's called rice and peas. It's rice and red beans, and it's cooked in that pot that you can see there. A lot of more outdoor cooking, and a lot of unique things I'd never had before. So in my first month, we were at a neighborhood party, and I was offered a soup that had a whole bunch of chunks in it. I don't really care for seafood, so I said, no thanks, I don't like seafood, and passed it on. And I got really lucky because I found out later the soup is called Manish water. And Manish water, what was in the soup was not seafood, but it's all the parts of a goat that you don't normally eat. So brains, testicles, heart, liver, things like that. So I got lucky and passed up on that. I also was able to make friends through food, a very Mennonite sort of thing, because a very common soup was chicken foot soup. And if you get the literal chicken foot in your soup, that's like considered very special, and it's a delicacy. And so whenever I would get a chicken foot in my soup, I would share it with someone, and then they'd be like, yay, thanks for being my friend. So enjoyed that. Here is a community cookout. You can see I'm eating jerk chicken and rice and peas, which would be a very common meal. They also, in St. Elizabeth, grow a ton of the food. It's the major agricultural part of the island, so I had incredible amounts of fresh fruits and vegetables available to me. Living there that year has ruined me for a ton of fruits: pineapple, mango, papaya, even bananas. In Jamaica, they don't have bananas. They have these smaller things called bumpies that look like bananas, and they're just so absolutely delicious. But I benefited from just having trees in the neighborhood where you could pick off fresh fruit and eat it. This is the main road coming down from our house into the community. You can see that in St. Elizabeth, they have this amazing like red clay dirt that stains all your shoes, but was really good for growing food. And goats. Like I said before, everybody has goats. So one of the things I had to get used to in Jamaica was a difference in what was culturally appropriate or the norm. So this is a picture that you would commonly see. In Jamaica, what is most important to Jamaicans is relationship, is spending time with others, getting to know them, and actually really caring about them. So in the US, as we pass someone, we might say, hey, how are you? Oh, fine, bye, and move on. That would be offensive to Jamaicans. You sit, you stay together, you talk for a while, you really get to know what's going on in the other person's life and how they're doing. So that was really different for me because growing up in the US, I was used to being really efficient in how I did things, being places on time. If I said I was going to be somewhere, I better be there. The education system here in the US really tells you that you're not going to be late to class. But in Jamaica, it's very, very different. Very common phrase is the phrase soon come. So if you are meeting someone, if you say, hey, let's meet at 2, there's no chance you see them before 3. And it's probably more likely about 4 o'clock when they'll get there, because in Jamaica, soon come is the lifestyle. We'll get there when we get there. Like, there are other important things in life. And say you're going to meet someone and you pass by a group and they engage in conversation with you, you can't just be like, oh, sorry, I'm going to meet someone else. You actually stay and interact with them and then move on when the time comes. So for me, that was really strange. And a song that one of my favorite bands, Sister Hazel, sings has a lyric in it: strange is just a different point of view. And I thought about that a lot the year I was living in Jamaica, and it was one of the greatest gifts I was given in living there, is to think what was strange to me was normal for them, and what was normal to me was strange. And so there's just different viewpoints. There's not necessarily one right or wrong one. Also, very common phrases to hear, ayiri, or no problem man. Those are not just tourist phrases. Those are things you would hear throughout. People saying, when it happens, it happens. Here's a photo of a common transportation in Jamaica. Very few people own cars, so most people walk or take taxis. The way you could tell a taxi is that they're white in Jamaica. All of the people you see here are getting ready to get into that taxi and go somewhere. So another thing I had to get used to in my time living there was the absence kind of personal space that I was used to. In a taxi cab, you have at least two people deep. So you have someone sitting on the seat and then someone sitting on the lap all the way across. You always have room for more. Another kind of thing that goes along with that and continues that mindset is Jamaicans are incredibly kind people and they love sharing. So anytime something really good happens to you, if you've been blessed, the idea is you pass that blessing along as well. So if somebody was celebrating something in the community, they would bring in speakers outside our little store area, and you would pay for as big a speakers as you could get, and you would blast the music as far and wide as you possibly could. So the music would play all day long till like 2 or 3 in the morning. And in the US, somebody would call the cops and complain about a noise violation. But in Jamaica, the thought was, no, I'm spreading what I have with others and sharing. One of the most touching things that happened to me when I arrived there is I'm a big cat lover, as you can see evidenced in the shirt that I am wearing there. And when we got there, my mom tried to find a cat for me, but there are no cats as pets in Jamaica. They said, you're probably going to have to go to the capital city of Kingston if you want to find a cat. But then someone told us, actually, there is one family in this community that has a cat. So second week we lived there, we went down to visit them, and the girl on the left, you can see there, Shirani, is the one who had a cat. So we went down to her house, and she had this one cat named Ashley, who you can see here. And we told her we were looking to get a cat, and so we just wanted to come and spend some time with one. To which she responded, you may have my cat. And we were shocked, and of course we're like, no, like this is your cat, we'll get another. And she was like, no, you're in a strange place, you don't know anybody, this is something that is a comfort to you, I want to be able to give you this. So eventually it took a little while, but she convinced us that we could have her cat for the time we would be living there. And that is probably one of the most precious gifts that has ever been given to me in my entire life. And it was by someone who at that point was a stranger to me. But obviously after this, we got to know each other really well. She became my best friend. We're celebrating her half birthday there, eating dinner together. And before we left the island, her and her mother, Anna, actually got baptized. And I got to celebrate that with them. And this is Ashley's kitten Tamarin right before we left. While we lived there, we lived on the property of Maranatha School for the Deaf. This is a classroom, and you can kind of see the uniforms there. Again, another example of uniforms. All schools in Jamaica, every school has its own uniform that you have to wear. My family, my mom and my sister and I were in charge of teaching the cooking classes as well as the computer classes at the school. So here we're sharing with them how to make donuts, which is not a thing in Jamaica, so sharing a little bit of our culture. And then also we taught computer while we were there as well. And this is another story of where I didn't belong. So when I moved to Jamaica, I knew no sign language. I only knew the ABCs and a few easy words. So the very first thing I was able to learn and learn well was this, which in Jamaican Sign Language is the sign for dumb, because I got it a whole lot. If I had to ask people to do something again, or I'd say slower, or can you finger spell? I don't know what that is. I could see them turn to each other and be like, oh boy, she's dumb. And I've never felt so devastated, so useless. I felt like the one with the inability. I remember laying in bed at night praying to God, why couldn't I have been born deaf so that I could be a part of this community and know, why am I so slow? Please help me out here. Eventually, I did learn sign language, and believe it or not, the thing that helped me the most is that I would sign to Backstreet Boys songs, which I've never used since then. Nobody needs me to sign along to Backstreet Boys. But I learned, and then I made tons of new friends. And at the school, here are the guys. Once they'd gone through the program, they stayed and learned technical and woodworking skills. This is the Christmas program. The year we were there, the pageant, I was the choreographer. My one and only time of doing that. I was also the donkey in the nativity scene. And this is the big finale, singing Happy Birthday, Jesus. You can see Jesus's birthday cake there. But I became friends. I learned the language. It was so worth the struggle that I went through, and I benefited so much from this. A last funny story. This is our dog. And when a lot of you guys know I'm a big Iowa Hawkeyes fan, so when we got this dog, we named him Hawkeye. But about 2 weeks into it, some local community members came up and said to us, "Why do you stand outside your house at night yelling, 'Hot guy, come?'" They're like, "If you need husbands for your daughters, we'll find you some." So we ended up having to change Hawkeye's name to Sooner because of the language barrier there. This is our local beach, Treasure Beach. It is not a tourist beach. EMS actually sent down a group during mini-term, which is what we now call E-term. And so this is that group with the students from the school, all of us together in the chapel auditorium. And when they were there, they helped to build a playground that eventually looked like this when it was complete. All right, so you've listened to me long enough today. Thank you for your patience. I have 3 questions for you before you go, and I'll finish my story and lessons on Thursday. So 3 things I'd like you to think of. 1, what things might you do differently if people didn't think that doing it that way was strange or different? 2, how can we be mindful of the blessings we have in this country and this community and be mindful of the way we use resources, tie into Earth Day, which was last week? And what gift could you give someone that would mean a lot to them, like Sharani did to me with the cat? And it doesn't have to be a thing. There are gifts otherwise. So thank you so much, and I look forward to finishing my story with you Thursday.